Welcome to our inaugural TED Talks Finance podcast. We are elated to be going on this journey, teaching people about finance, all things encompassing to lifestyle and just financial prosperity and building true wealth. That's one thing we're big on. So for our first month and our first guest, we have one of my very good friends, Adam Bowe. I'll let Adam kind of speak for himself on some exciting stuff about what makes him qualified to be on this podcast with us. And so Adam, as we kind of dive in, why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you like, and your life. Tell me.
Yeah, dude, honored to be the first guest. This is fun. This is exciting. So for me, I'm in my 40s. I grew up in California, studied engineering at USC, started my career at a nuclear power plant, learned a lot, learned how to operate a nuclear power plant. Met my wife, got married. We had 2 daughters. They're currently 14 and 8, and I continue to work in the electric utility business. It's been a really stable career, the kind of career where the pay is good. It's not like astronomical, but it's definitely consistent, not prone to the ups and downs of the economy because people are always going to need electricity. Yep. And so, and as far as like my financial journey, the family I grew up in, my parents weren't extremely wealthy. I mean, we lived I would say a comfortable, modest kind of life. And, when I went to school at USC, it was very eye-opening just being surrounded by people that came from, really wealthy families. And, just kind of noticing some of the things that they do and like the freedoms that they have that were kind of different than what my experience was. Just kind of, I remember that standing out to me and just thinking like, how do I get from there to from where I was to there? And
totally,
not just for myself, but like now that I have a wife and kids, like how do I extend that through generations? And so
habits of the wealthy are something that I say to clients all the time, like kind of pop out. You oftentimes find yourself wondering like, okay, what are they doing that I'm not? Or what is it, where did they start, right? Outside of generational wealth, what is it that I'm going to do differently to be able to lead myself to there? So totally, especially growing up in California. I mean, I feel like I had some of that growing up in Colorado, growing up in a small town, but a relatively affluent town. It's funny because my family was kind of similar, as they always did well, but it was pretty modest. Looking around at some of the wealth surrounding us was always eye-opening. And when I was a kid, I remember talking to my dad about, what is it that they're doing? And I feel like he was always good about keeping me in check of like, well, what is it that you're chasing? Do you want to be wealthy so that other people see that? Or do you want to be wealthy to have, freedom, time, you name it? So, Adam, I just want to talk a little bit about how you and I kind of came to get to know each other. So first, when you and I first met was through our church. You're a person of faith. That's something I wanted to make sure that we harp on a little bit is, what that looks like for you as a husband, father, and what it is for how you interact with your community. But, that's how you and I got to know each other. We both play guitar, but, coming to get to know each other through church and then, having later discussion, learning a little bit about, things that are important to you, hearing about your background a little bit, you and I kind of outside of developing a friendship through church eventually sat down. I remember at Mellow Mushroom shortly after Christmas services, just started talking about finances and investments, taxes, a couple of things like that. And that eventually led to you and I sitting down. And now Adam and I are business partners in some other aspects, which is cool too. But since when you and I first sat down and with your wife, Giselle, how would you say that some of your life may have changed kind of on the financial or personal side since we first sat down?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just remembering when I first met you, it was at the Chandler campus. The 2 things that stood out was that you were one of the most confident young people I'd ever met. Just like walked up, hey Adam, nice to meet you, I'm TJ. I'm like, how does this kid know my name and why is he so confident? But and you were a lot younger at that time, so yeah. But then also we had a mutual friend in Bob Honeycutt, and so that was such a random connection to me because I used to work with him. And but anyway, and then so like you said, the journey kind of took off from there. I think we were both kind of like similarly motivated to improve and just like continue to learn and develop. And so, as far as like once we kind of jumped in to, the financial planning journey and some of the business ventures, The things that have changed has just been a few things as far as my mindset related to wealth and the way I view assets.
Yeah.
And like I view them as a necessity now. It's something that needs to be something that helps me grow. It's like a vehicle to growth. And then the other part is more of a focus on like net worth as opposed to just more income. And then really like a diversification of like long-term investments and retirement type setup. It's kind of focusing on maxing out my 401k is like that's, the common knowledge among, I guess, people that I work with and others in that like stage of life is if you just max out your 401k, you'll be fine, you'll be set. And that was kind of what I was doing, but it was like all my eggs in one basket. And then, we talked about the book, The Power of One, and the concept of
Power of Zero.
Sorry.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Thank you. Power of Zero and like the importance of tax diversification. So if you think about a 401k, you're just, you're getting the tax benefit now. You're not paying tax on it, but you're agreeing to pay tax in the future. Yeah. And so what if that tax rate is higher? Yeah. It's a worse deal. So totally. So then, we looked into different options as far as you can still, invest in 401k and do that at least up to the company match, maybe more if it makes sense. Yeah. But then other vehicles where, maybe you agree to like put it in another account where you pay the tax now, but then you get the benefit later on, something like a Roth IRA. And then also the IUL was a thing I had never really heard of until talking with you. And the more that I read about it and learned about it, it was something that I found interesting. And so for sure, maybe that's where you get into like, the habits of the wealthy is like things like that aren't necessarily common knowledge. Yeah, totally. I've always found that there's a high correlation between people who have a lot of freedom of their time with a high net worth, right? And people don't get to a net worth without building it, typically through things that are diversified. Right. And that's definitely one thing you'd mentioned, is 401k. It's, don't let me or anyone else sit here and tell you that 401k is bad, right? You can get a match from your employer, and that's I don't want to say free, but basically free money, right? Where you can say 100% match. Me or any other financial planner offering you or guaranteeing you 100% rate of return right away, you'd be like, what's going on, right? So take advantage of different options like that. And, I think that's something important that we tell our clients a lot is there's, strength in numbers. Power in diversification is, you want to have eggs in a lot of different baskets in that way. So, yeah, for you and your family, it was kind of like, when we first sat down, like you'd said, some of the things learning from when you were younger is like find a way to have substantial income, make sure that you're investing it, and live below your means, right? Well, that's almost the easy part. For a lot of American families, it's like that's hard. But, once you're doing all that, how do you then further optimize some of that? And I think that's kind of where we took yours and your family's journey, from the get-go. Outside of just making those changes and allocations, within your existing plans, how would you say that your maybe life or mindset have changed since that time? I know you'd said there was like a bit of a mindset shift with assets, but what about like personal life? How's that changed for like you and your girls? Yeah, so my daughters at 14 and 8 we're coming up on college years, especially for the oldest one, Rachel. Quickly, yeah. And so, part of it, I think, is just less of a focus on my own self and like having nice things and, having a good job in my career and things like that, where it's kind of self-centered. And I think it's a process of adulthood and just parenthood in general is becoming more and more selfless, putting others above yourself. And so for me, a lot of it is looking down the road and thinking, how best can I set them up? Yeah. And I think that's another reason why I'm really interested in acquiring assets, because it's something that can be passed down generationally. And I think the other part is, as we're going through this journey and learning about it, not just keeping that knowledge to ourselves, but like sharing it with them. And, and I think the other part is the relationships. Like, we have a good relationship with you and your family. And,
Yeah.
and I know that through your business, you've developed a lot of good relationships with others. And so it's really like the networking aspect is really cool as well. And, you know, different parts of that have already benefited me in other business ventures, like working with Iron Sharpens Iron and partnering that with the CrossFit gym that I own. And a few other things like that where it's just like, man, had I not taken the dive with you to like jump in and do this financial planning, like honestly, we've gone all in with it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's there's benefits that I didn't expect, and you know, but it's like you don't know that when you're signing on that paper. But you know,
different from like your average financial, you know, advisor situation. You know, a couple things Adam, you know, neglected to mention earlier is, you know, he owns property. He's, you know, a well-compensated, you know, high-level manager of people. He owns a CrossFit gym. He's also a professional photographer, just to brag on you for a minute. But you're right. There's a lot more that goes into it than, you know, some of the things we often talk about. So, you know, Adam, investments are some of the things that people think obviously with financial planning or investing, right? What's my financial advisor doing for me? Is my money growing? XYZ, you know, your experience, I would say you've been, you know, happy with what we've done here, but that, you know, that's not always the case for some people because people's different risk tolerances can allow for investment mixes being different. You know, one of the things that we oftentimes try to help people understand is the bigger picture. You know, in your industry, you know, you're a manager of people, but in the utility, one thing I've heard you talk about a bunch is like, if the power goes down, people can lose lives, right? So I'd say risk management is like a big part of your job and career. You know, how would you say that some of the planning that we've done for you and your family with your finances has maybe had some crossover to the risk management you do in your, you know, day-to-day?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like my view of risk was kind of compartmentalized because in my day-to-day work, we focus on risk to the transmission system day in and day out. And then when we talked about finances, you know, was looking at risk like here and here, and then eventually everything kind of melded in my mind and thinking like, okay, a lot of the same concepts apply. And as far as things that, you know, that we've done since, you know, some of those first conversations, things that I hadn't thought about, like what if I get hit by a bus, you know, and I'm the only source of income for my family, like what do they do? Will they be good in 1 year from that event, which hopefully never happens, but totally, or 5 years or 10 or 20. And so, you know, the term life insurance and a few of the other types of insurance options that were presented made a lot of sense in that context. And so that's one thing where, you know, you have to look at all the possibilities, all the scenarios, and then define some of the ones that you think are the worst ones, and then have a plan. I'm sure you guys do that all the time. Like you have to develop a plan because power is obviously not always going out, but like with natural disasters and other things, you have to have a risk management plan for if it happens. You know, it's funny. I heard you use my favorite analogy that I use all the time is like, if I get hit by a bus, what does that mean for you? You know, my wife, my kids, my family, you name it. It's like, I oftentimes use the, you know, metaphor or analogy of like, you saved your whole life to buy a Porsche, right? That Porsche in my mind for a lot of clients is like their 401k, right? It's like you saved your whole life to do this thing that has so much importance to you. You drive it out of your neighborhood and some other idiot runs right into you, right? There's all sorts of things that in your financial journey can happen to you, right? It's like loss of life, disability, maybe an illness, right? I see all the time families, they get cancer and there's first thing you see from them beyond them telling you is GoFundMe, right? It's like, how is this going to financially affect us as a family? And, you know, for you guys, that was definitely, it's like, as a stable income family, those things are still super important. So what about the people that aren't stable, right? It's super, super important. You know, COVID was something that was pretty crazy in 2020 and a lot of people, you know, ending up in the hospital on ventilators, doing all these other things. That was kind of an eye-opening time. You know, your family had, you know, someone in close proximity, a neighbor, go through a situation that, you know, really tragically ended up leading to loss of life for the breadwinner and husband of that family. You know,
the timing was almost uncanny after we had done some of that planning for you and your family. How did you feel, maybe either peace or, you know, what did you feel during that time seeing another family go through some of the things that can happen, you know, especially someone in a very similar age and, you know, area as you?
Yeah, that was just a sad situation to have to witness.
Heartbreaking, yeah.
And so, our neighbor contracted COVID and then was in the hospital for like 6 months and eventually passed. He's got a family, a wife with, and you know, they have 3 daughters. The youngest one is around the same age as my daughters. I think she's maybe 11 or 12 now. And so, seeing that, dude, I do photography, as you mentioned, and at the funeral, like it really hit me when I saw one of the family photos that I took of them, like at the funeral. But yeah, so, and you know, I don't know I don't know the details of their financial situation. They had a nice house, and you know, they seemed like they did well, but really just like in the aftermath of all that, just you know, it just seemed like such a bad situation. So
How did it make you and maybe Giselle feel, you know, during that time frame? Did it make you feel peace about, you know, if something like that were to happen with you guys, or, you know, did it make you feel a confidence to address other needs in your life, maybe because that had been taken care of, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a part of it. I think actually a lot of our focus was just on maintaining our own health.
Yeah, totally.
But I feel like it's all related. I know, you know, talking with your father, he always says health is wealth.
Big time.
And so, but, you know, I think it's all related in that like the purpose, in my opinion, of building wealth, or at least one of them, is to give yourself freedom to like spend your time doing the things that you think are important. And for us, you know, maintaining our health is one of those things.
Yeah.
So whether that's like a gym membership, or we've got like a garage gym at our house. We also own the CrossFit gym, obviously, but so that's like one of our values, and all this helps us, you know, live out that value.
Yeah.
And then I would say the other thing is, peace of mind, knowing that like they'll be set if something happens. But a lot of it's like preventable things, you know, like some things you can't prevent, but back to that risk management thing, how do I maintain my health in such a way that I'm minimizing my health risks? Yeah,
absolutely. So, like risk management, it's funny to say risk management when you're thinking of financial planning, but like a couple years ago I took up golf, and my brother-in-law, who's a former professional golfer, was like, basically the entire game of golf is you're managing your mistakes.
Yeah.
Like you are constantly going to make a mistake. Or I saw a professional golfer, you know, Brooks Koepka say, he's like, I literally am exclusively messing up, right? You know, like if I was doing it perfectly, I'd hit it in the hole every single shot. So my whole entire time frame while I'm out there for 4 hours playing golf is managing how bad I'm messing up, right? It's like I think of that risk management part with like very controllable factors. For example, it's like if you're only investing $1, where could that dollar be best split up to actually be efficient? And, you know, taxes in retirement are something that so many people, I feel like, just completely negate or neglect, right? It's like, Adam, what if I told you that your 401k is like the number one asset for your family in retirement, right, outside of your primary home, that you don't want to leverage for income later on? You'd be like most other families in America, right? 401k all day. But what if I told you later on that you have a amount of that 401k that doesn't actually belong to you, and that amount can be ever changing? Moving the goalposts, right? If I'm the IRS, I'm like, hey, Adam, this year your tax bracket's going to be 45%. It's like, whoa, that $1 million I had in my 401k is a lot smaller than the $1 million I saw on paper, right? So like, Power of Zero is something you brought up earlier, and, you know, reading through that book, ideas about how to diversify, you know, our taxation, you know, exposure in retirement. You know, when I had given you that book previously, I know you'd mentioned, you know, the timing was uncanny. It was like you were literally watching your family go through it as we were reading through this and talking about it. You know, the idea that sheltering some of your retirement assets from taxes could be important beyond just your investment gains. Like, what did that kind of change for you when we thought about that, when you had been doing that 401k all day kind of strategy?
Yeah, I mean, just like there were two things. The eye-opening part was just the concept of, well, what if the tax rate's higher? And it's like such a simple thought, but wasn't one that I had thought. And then the other thing was seeing my parents, as my dad retired, and seeing them live that out in real time where, like you said, on paper they had a lot of money, but based on their annual income and, collecting other things like Social Security and things like that, they were in this weird spot where and my dad was doing some contracting work too, so if you made over a certain amount, his taxes would go from a small amount to a very large amount.
Crazy.
So he would have to exceed that by like $50,000 just to like almost break even.
Yep.
And so, kind of connecting all those dots and thinking that approach seemed like it was good, but now that I'm seeing the results of it, I don't want to be in that position.
Yeah.
But also not having the knowledge or tools, at that time to get myself there.
Yeah.
And, in all other aspects of my life, I'm comfortable going and asking for help on certain things that I don't possess that skill set or that knowledge. And so that's kind of, and like our friendship was growing too. So it felt like the right thing to do at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like one piece that, not that we're leaving it out, but one piece that's really important is, where does God stand in all this with your life, as a person of faith? And, at the end of the day, where do we believe our wealth comes from and where do we store it, right? Is, if we store up our treasures here, right, we can't take them, right? If we're, seeing a greater picture in the role that God has in our life. One thing that I've, always respected about you and your family is the role that, tithe has in your financial plan and things like that, Do you believe, you obviously do, but, do you believe that God has been able to help you store wealth in a different way, maybe in the last, 5-10 years than maybe you would have believed as a younger man? And, what role does faith have in the way that you try to store wealth for you and your wife and kids?
Yeah, I would say my faith, belief in Jesus Christ is the main part of it all, where, we do tithe. It's, it's always something that we have on the top of our list in our budget. And, the ability to be generous is, the Bible says it's more blessed to give than to receive. Yeah. And so the ability to like make income like I do and steward it well, it's something that we've prayed to be able to do, and it's something God's blessed us with. So I feel like it's everything. It's we want to be, like the parable of the talents. We don't want to be the guy that just buries it in the sand and then brings it back.
Totally.
One for one, like trying to multiply it by 5 or by 10 or whatever we can.
Right.
And not just use it for ourselves, but to try to be generous and bless others with it. So.
Right. Yeah, I think it's in James, every good and perfect gift comes from above, right? It's like at the end of the day, we're just stewarding what's God's, right? And our tithe is just giving back to him what was his anyway, right? Adam, if you could take yourself back to when you were a younger man, I know you said you're in your 40s, you're at USC, probably a very different person at that point in your life, right? But hey, if you could go back there, right, maybe right when you just got married or right when you just had, your eldest daughter, what would be some advice that you'd give yourself then? It could be personally, it could be professionally, but like Adam now talking to Adam then, what would you encourage, what would you encourage him in? Or what advice would you give him?
Yeah, a few things stand out. I would say buy Bitcoin. I would also...
Unofficial, we do not endorse that.
Yeah, that's not coming from my financial planner. That's just me talking to my former self.
Totally.
I would also say never sell any assets that you own. Like we've owned a handful of homes, some in Southern California, some out here. And, when we moved from California to Arizona, we ended up selling, and I wish we never sold that house. So never sell assets, or at least avoid that at extreme cost or whatever the term would be. But
yeah.
And then I would just say, like, it's not about how much you make, it's how much you keep.
Totally.
And so there's a lot of things, as a young guy in my mid to late 20s, making really good money, at least further ahead in like my income than I thought I would be at that age. and just thinking like I can buy all these guitars and amps and gear and just like stuff for my hobbies that I was interested in.
Yeah, totally.
It's like just chill and like do what you know is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And probably ask for help from like a person like yourself or a planner just to like get things set up. Because really it's about time. Like if you invest $1,000 when you're 5 and then by the time you're 6, I don't even know what that number would be, but that's better than if you're starting at like 25 or 35.
Oh yeah, you miss a week here, you miss a year there. If you've ever seen an exponential growth curve, boy, does it shoot up a lot faster at the end, right? So absolutely. I mean, topic shift a little bit is, one thing that a lot of our clients sometimes I feel like is a hang up or, a fear with working with a financial advisor is, financial planning fees. What does it cost you to actually work with an expert? Shout out my friend Grant Runyon once said early on in my career, typically for clients, fees are an issue in the absence of value, right? So what value is your financial planner giving you that's helping, negate those fees in a lot of ways? Would you say that you've ever, wondered about financial planning fees and the value that they have in your plan, or how has that been overcome through your experience with working with me and my practice?
Yeah, it's never really been a concern. I mean, all the details of my plan, but where my money was invested, there's fees there too. So I feel like the fees are such a nominal part in my opinion, because there's, you're exchanging like a few, tenths or hundredths of a percentage point here and there. And the idea is like, are you going to sweat the little fine points and miss the big things?
Yeah, miss the forest for the trees.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
And also like we're seeing this with, some of my relatives right now where the inaction, like the hesitation to like take that step is actually the most expensive. It's costing them the most money compared to like a few of the little details here and there.
We call it the cost of waiting.
Yeah, the cost of waiting. And so like I've never sweat the fees, and I from what I've looked at, I'm sure they're competitive, but
yeah, shout out to my other friend, Scott Donald, that I just had the pleasure of meeting, wrote a book called Value Creation Kid. That's something that you and I have talked a little bit about, what's the value that you're creating? We've talked about that with your daughters. A lot of parents, give allowance to their kids, or they try to encourage them, with financial incentives to just do routine things around the house. That's part of what I would call the buy-in to the family. I've heard somebody else say, allowance is socialism, right? Maybe we're not saying that, but at the end of the day, one thing you and I have talked about with your girls is, how can we incentivize them to essentially enter the workforce at home beyond the scope of what their normal duties are, to help teach them how to create value for the world around them. We're relatively new into that with you and your girls, but what would you say a shift has already been, in seeing their interactions with the home and creating value for your family and maybe those around?
So Rachel, we'll have her clean the pool, we'll have her clean the gym.
Yep.
We've established a rate for those activities. There's a few other ones.
Yeah.
But I've taught her how to write invoices. So I'm getting invoices from my 14-year-old, which is really funny to me.
How to get paid, that's important.
Yeah. And so, I'm trying to like leverage these opportunities to teach her some other skills as well. And if
she doesn't send you an invoice, what happens?
She doesn't get paid.
And that's an important skill to learn in life, right?
That's right.
How to manage yourself as a person who's creating value, right? If you're good at something, you shouldn't do it for free, right? Unless you're serving, the Lord or the people around you. But
and that's the other part is, she'll submit the invoice. And then she's like, when are you going to pay me? I'm like, well, you don't always get paid immediately when you submit an invoice.
First and the 15th. Sorry, honey.
Could be 2 weeks, could be a month.
Yeah.
But then when she does, it's like, the expectation is that she'll tithe and do that part of it too. So we're really trying to like give her that experience of actually doing a gig, making the money, like doing all the things you need to do to get paid, and then what to do when you do get paid.
Yeah.
And we also have her on some of your plans as well.
Yeah.
With a goal of saving enough to purchase a home to make a down payment by the time she's 18. So, and she's bought in. Rachel's definitely bought in. With Shelby, we have more time, and she's 8. But she also does a few gigs around the house, pulling weeds and things like that. And same process. like learning how to do invoices. She needs a little more help.
Yeah, totally.
She's on board too. So.
Yeah, invoicing at the age of 8 can be a little bit tough, right? But it's a valuable skill. Hot button topic, one thing that you and I have talked at length about, is the concept of debt. There's a financial voice that's out there for a lot of folks that's pretty anti-debt, I would say. And, I always say that it's totally dependent on the client, right? It's like if some people, their only life goal is to be able to have everything free and clear and they just want that peace of mind, great. I'm going to coach them as their advisor on the ways to help best create that situation for them. But some of the things that you and I have put into practice in our individual plans, and some of what I coach people to often is the concept of leveraging debt, right? And what that looks like. There's good debt, bad debt. There's also been some good books that you and I have referred to each other, and ones that a lot of people know as well. When it comes to leveraging debt, what role has that played either, for or against your personal financial plan and or net worth?
Yeah, so I agree. I think there's good debt and bad debt. I would say bad debt's like consumer debt, where you're on a credit card, or other types of debt where essentially like there's no asset, there's the wealth or the value, I should say, in whatever you use that debt to purchase or invest in disappears. So it could be a car, it could be other just things.
Yeah, and concept of assets versus liabilities. Rich dad, poor dad, shout out.
Yeah, exactly. And then concept of leveraging debt, I feel like as long as you're basically using it to buy a house or some type of asset that retains value or appreciates, is the right move. It's a way to get there. If we had enough like liquid funds to be able to get into some of those homes without having to leverage debt, that could work too. But if your return on that asset is greater than the rate that you're paying to leverage that debt, then you come out ahead. Yeah. And like as far as risk goes, I would say it's lower risk, because if things turn upside down as far as the returns you're getting, you can always exit that position, like sell that house, and then you no longer have that debt. So exit strategy, that's something important. One thing that you'd mentioned is, what are you going to do to out earn that rate that you're paying? The cost of borrowing is what I talk to people a lot. And that can also include not just purchasing property, which can give you other tax benefits, right? Refer to your tax professional for specifics on that. But taking that money at a stated rate to borrow it, how can you out earn that? That could be in the market, that could be in real estate, that could be a lot of different ways. Investing in yourself, maybe it's a small business, right? Things like that exist for a reason. But Adam, it's been a pleasure getting to work with you and your family, your wife, your daughters, and we've been able to help a lot of people through our own personal endeavors as well. And so it's a pleasure getting to have you and your family as clients. And, Rifkin Wealth Management, TED Talks Finance, we're grateful for you. And thanks for being a part of our show or podcast today. Number 1 down, and we're looking forward to the future. Thanks. Thank you.